Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
This week she's been called the Trump Whisperer. Journalist Salena Zito was less than 2 metres from Donald Trump when he was shot and wounded at that rally in Pennsylvania last year. I'll be talking to her about that and what reporters still don't understand about Trump's supporters.
I don't think you can replicate him. No, there will never be another one like Donald Trump.
And I'll be looking at the facts behind the stats. Is crime out of control in the American capital or not? My guest, crime data analyst Jeff Asher.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and publicly at least, there's not really a ton of evidence other than the claim.
And let's begin with President Trump's unprecedented takeover of policing in Washington, D.C.
President Trump Monday announces a crackdown on D.C. crime, deploying the National Guard to city streets.
We're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back.
And just as he did back in June when he sent National Guard troops into Los Angeles to quell protests over immigration raids, President Trump has sent troops onto the streets of Washington, D.C.
To rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
This time he has gone even further, exerting his federal powers over Washington, D.C. to take control of the Metropolitan Police Force for at least 30 days, possibly longer if Congress approves or even if they don't.
Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people.
Recognising there's pretty much nothing she can do to stop him, DC Mayor Muriel Bowser used this as an opportunity to advocate for DC statehood.
We know that access to our democracy is tenuous. That is why you have heard me and many Washingtonians before me advocate for full statehood for the District of Columbia. We are American citizens. Our families go to war. We pay taxes and we uphold the responsibilities of citizenship.
Washington, D.C. has a population of a little over 700,000 people. Compared to actual states, that's larger than Wyoming or Vermont, close to Alaska and North Dakota. Although the greater Washington area, which also takes in parts of Virginia and Maryland, has a population of over 6 million. Yet DC, because they're not a state, has no voting rights in Congress. One House member does sit, but they can't vote. They have no senators. All other states, including Wyoming and Vermont, have 2 senators each. And DC is overwhelmingly Democratic. It's 3 electoral college votes for president. They do get those. They went to Kamala Harris. She got more than 90% of the vote in 2024. There are more black people living in DC than white people or Hispanic people. So to some, this is also about race. Mayor Bowser, though, has taken a less combative approach than, say, the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who, you recall, opposed Donald Trump sending in the troops there this year. While the DC mayor denies that crime in the capital is out of control, she also says, well, she's going to make use of the extra, albeit uninvited, resources, which she maintains will be under the direction of the DC Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith.
What I'm focused on is the federal surge and how to make the most of the additional officer support that we have. We have the best in the business in MPD and Chief Pamela Smith to lead that effort and to make sure that the men and women who are coming from federal law enforcement are being well used.
So far, that use includes using them to clear out homeless encampments and get rid of protesters. President Trump, who it seems remains a property developer at heart, clearly doesn't like what he sees on the streets of the US Capitol, and he's determined to get it looking spick and span.
When you look at some of the buildings here, it's so magnificent, and everything's good, but it's just dirty and not properly maintained. It's not taken care of. Potholes in the roads. All of it's going to happen very quickly. We're going to seek a relatively small amount of money for fix-up, and we're going to put it out to bid, and we have great contractors here.
He spent a lot of time talking about asphalt and then grass. He's got a real thing about the grass in Washington, D.C. He made it all sound like a bit of a quickie renovation, the kind you do when you're about to sell your house. Meanwhile, some D.C. residents are far from happy with all of these hundreds of federal agents suddenly appearing on their streets.
You see these fascists right here?
Fascists?
You! Take a look at this cell phone video from late Sunday night. 37-year-old Sean Dunn, shown in the pink shirt and shorts, allegedly yelling at federal officers on 14th Street in D.C.
Y'all laughing, but that's the truth now.
Moments later, video appearing to show him crossing the street, screaming just inches from a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer's face.
Hey, let's go get him, bro.
And then appearing to hit the officer in the chest with a foot-long Subway sandwich. Officers immediately chasing Dunn in the street and eventually catch and arrest him.
Oh, so that's what they mean by subway crime. That man turns out to be a Department of Justice employee, and Attorney General Pam Bondi says he, in fact, is the deep state. Either way, he faces a felony charge up to a year in prison for throwing that foot-long sandwich at an officer.
Trump, like that fellow there, needs to work out what he's doing because he is all over the place. By contrast, I'm not surprised that Mayor Bowser's trying to make the most of the extra manpower. The DC police currently have about 3,200 officers, but they used to have 4,000 officers back in 2013. That's a period when they had their lowest murder rate for about 50 years. And since 2022, Bowser has been trying to increase funding for hundreds more police to get them back to 4,000 officers. But Trump, who supposedly is all about funding the police, is saying no way.
I was told today, sir, they want more police. I heard a number, 3,500 police. That's a lot of police. 3,500. We need more. You don't need more. That's so many. I never heard. That's like an army. This is not a big area. It's ridiculous. What you need is rules and regulations, and you need the right people to implement them. And we have the right people here, that I can tell you.
But if DC doesn't need more law enforcement, then why are you forcing more law enforcement on them right now? It doesn't make sense. And if all you need is to be tougher on crime with your prosecutions and your justice system, well, who does Trump think runs the justice system in DC at the moment? It's the US attorney that Trump appoints who does the job of prosecuting serious local crimes. Their local trial court? It's the DC Superior Court, whose judges are appointed by Trump and confirmed by the Senate. The official who is ultimately responsible for how a lot of the DC justice system works is actually Pam Bondi, the woman Trump just placed in charge of the DC police, and he just said this about her.
And you need the right people to implement them, and we have the right people here, that I can tell you.
And now he's talking about beautifying the place? Huh? This is not his job. Let's look at exactly what authority Trump has, because generally it's Congress that controls DC, not the president. Firstly, DC has its own small National Guard, and the president commands them completely. Unlike in LA, he can use the National Guard here for ordinary law enforcement purposes. They're like his own mini DC police force. Also, he does have the power to take control of the DC police whenever he determines that special conditions of an emergency nature exist which require the use of the DC police force for federal purposes. And that's exactly what he just did. He determined there was a crime emergency. I think that's garbage, but it's his determination, so that is actually legal. He can only use the DC police, though, for federal purposes, like, say, patrolling federal buildings or guarding federal property. He can't tell them how to do their own day-to-day jobs. So all the changes he wants to make to the way the DC police do things day-to-day, that's beyond his authority. They can ignore him. So how is he using these powers of his? Well, he's getting federal officers and the National Guard to stroll around in the National Mall where there is no crime and to pose for photos at the Washington Monument. They're not going to the high crime areas of DC and actually helping the police. As an Army spokesperson told Fox News, the troops are being called to help local law enforcement with logistics, support, transportation and administration duties, as well as being visible around the National Mall. That's a part of our assignment, he said, to go to the national monuments and be present. Pete Hegseth specifically said they are not going to be involved in law enforcement operations, so it's completely a PR exercise. Meanwhile, a 2021 report found that 500 people are responsible for about 70% of DC's gun crime. Those are the people the DC police need to worry about. And look, they are cracking down on crime there. never mind what Trump tells you, there is right now a curfew going on for every single night for all under 18 juveniles. It's been going for 6 weeks. It's got another 2 weeks to run. That is significantly tougher on crime than anything Trump's proposing. Trump has basically done nothing the last week, but he's acting like everything's changed overnight because some army guys are hanging around the National Mall.
Crime is the worst it's ever been, but it started as of about yesterday. It started you see a big change, and people are feeling safe already. I've had so many calls, thank you, sir, thank you. They were afraid to walk out. They're not afraid anymore.
Yeah, it's all better. Look, I'm not worried about this takeover in itself being some authoritarian nightmare. I think it's largely for show. But I am worried that this is meant to condition us to seeing troops just hanging around our major cities. And it wouldn't be long before Trump was breaking the law, like, say, by ignoring the 30-day limit on his powers.
Federalization of the police has a 30-day limit unless Congress acts to extend it. Are you talking to Congress about extending it, or do you believe 30 days is sufficient?
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we're going to want extensions. I don't want to call national emergency. If I have to, I will.
See that there? That would be crossing a line into permanent police state behaviour. That's a worry. I'm also worried about this talk from people like Congressman Troy Downing about trying to replicate these activities in other blue cities where they don't have a special relationship like DC, and that would be totally unjustified and illegal.
Hopefully this is a harbinger of what we see in these liberally run cities across the country that have crime problems and have a problem with us just not enforcing our laws. I mean, it's a really simple thing. Enforce the laws. Make our streets safe again.
I don't know what blue cities he's talking about there, but if he's talking about New York and LA and Chicago, which they usually are, they have lower crime rates than these guys pretend.
Details. Yeah, look, and when they talk about, Democrat-run cities, cities are typically run by Democrats. Yeah. Cities vote for Democrats. The exurban and rural areas vote for Republicans. So, look, it is a concern. I think you're right to a large extent. This isn't about a massive problem inside DC itself. A lot of the crime is concentrated outside of DC and the housing projects and so on. There's a higher crime rate out there, a lot of violent crime as well. This is about appearances to an extent, like the asphalt that Trump talks about and the grass. This is about putting people in army uniforms with high-powered guns and armoured personnel carriers and Humvees onto the streets of Washington, D.C. as a show of force. It is about having them on the National Mall. It is because Trump likes the appearance of military uniforms. We know that. It is a part of his psyche. There's something he likes about the military. So it is what a powerful capital should look like. Military on the streets. I think it operates at that level. It is also about the them and us of the Democrats in the cities and so on. It is also about the race and the fact that a lot of the people being policed are people of colour. The other thing, of course, is this will make the city centre of Washington, D.C. a bit safer for people like that 19-year-old Doge staffer who was carjacked at 3 o'clock in the morning near DuPont Circuit with his date by a group of teenagers who stole his car. There have been a number of members of Congress and staffers who have been attacked in downtown Washington, D.C., where they feel as though they should be perfectly safe. You might suggest that's white privilege, that they should feel safe because they're important and they work in government. So there is a bit of support for this kind of crackdown around the city, but it's not going to do anything for where the real crime is. But those are, those statistics Trump will quietly discredit and ignore.
Yeah, look, if they were improving the crime situation, I might support it. But they're not.
No, they're not.
And let's talk about stats, because that's the ultimate proof of the pudding here, shall we? According to the left,
violent crime is actually at a 30-year low here in Washington, D.C.
The rate is now at a 30-year low.
Whereas according to the right,
the murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher. This is much higher.
So that's all very confusing. Which is it? Well, one thing I'm not going to be doing is citing DC's official violent crime stats at all, because frankly, they're in doubt. A month ago, the police union made a complaint that they believe police supervisors were manipulating crime data to make it appear that violent crime has fallen considerably compared to last year, hence the 30-year lows we keep hearing about. I'm not going to go into detail about those allegations right now because they're boring, but if you're interested, you can go to the very interesting Pet podcast right there. I talk about it forever. But the important thing is we don't know if the allegations are true. If they are true, they only affect local violent crime stats for the last 2 years, and that's it. So I will ignore those stats. But you know what you can't fake? Dead bodies. These are the numbers of murders committed over the previous 12 months. As you can see, as of December 2023, there had been 274 murders in the previous 12 months. Today, there have been 175 murders in the previous 12 months. That's a drop of 36% in 18 months. Let's also look at this recent spike in context. The murder rate in DC is now about a third of what it was back in 1991. That spike is what a crime emergency actually looks like, not now. The other thing people are looking a lot at the moment is juvenile crime. In particular, DC led the country a few years back in carjackings, and more than half of those were committed by juveniles. Once again, those stats are relatively well reported because of car insurance claims. So why don't we look at juvenile arrests for carjacking over the previous 12 months? As you can see, once again, there was a massive spike in April last year of 224 arrests, but by the end of last year, that was only 80 arrests, about a third as many. And in fact, there were only 16 carjackings in total reported in Washington, D.C. last month. 87% fewer than there were reported 2 years earlier. And all of those stats, they're completely without question. Also, while I'm not going to cite Washington, D.C.'s official violent crime stats, I will say that all the other data out there, and there is a lot out there, does suggest that violent crime is falling. For example, there is a technology they use called ShotSpotter, which registers every single gun fired in the dodgy areas of DC. It hears them. And that shows a 16% drop in gunfire through the first half of 2025 compared to the first half of 2024, and a 45% drop in gunfire relative to the first half of 2023. So that there suggests a large drop in violent crime, as does the fact the violent crime rate has gone down in the last year pretty much everywhere in America. It's way lower than it was 30 years ago. That's a national graph you're looking at right there. Even Kash Patel said this in the same press conference.
We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in U.S. history, in modern recorded U.S. history, thanks to this team behind me and President Trump's priorities.
Thanks, Trump, for helping us for the last 2 years. Also, Trump officials had no problem acknowledging DC's falling violent crime rate when it was more convenient for them, like, say, back in April, when Trump's US attorney boasted about a 25% drop in violent crime in DC and attributed it to Trump's first 100 days again. Oh, he's doing so much great work. Then again in May, when this Trump official paid tribute to the falling violent crime rates in DC.
Crime is down in Washington, D.C., street crime, violent crime by 25%. And people have seen, they've noticed a big difference.
He's probably thanking Trump as well. Also, if there's such a crime emergency in DC right now, then why did FEMA just last week slash DC's urban security fund by 44%? That's a bit of a mystery. So yeah, I would say that DC's crime rate is high. It still had the 7th highest murder rate in America last year, even with the murder rates falling. So if Trump wants to actually help the DC police fight crime, go for it. But so far, it's all kind of hype and bullshit as far as I'm concerned, and not a real emergency. But look, I'm not a crime expert, am I? Who cares what I think? So I asked a crime expert, crime data analyst Jeff Asher, what he thought. Jeff Asher, welcome to Planet America. Now let's start with these question marks being raised by a DC police commander being investigated for allegedly manipulating violent crime statistics. Does that affect how much we can trust any of these stats, and why?
I don't know whether or not the accusation has legs, and obviously extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And publicly, at least, there's not really a ton of evidence other than the claim. So the degree to which it's true, I don't know. I wrote in my piece that I thought that they were underreporting the aggravated assaults, the assaults with a deadly firearm, but that obviously the murder data is perfectly clear that we're seeing a large decline, 34% drop between the first 7 months of this year and the first 7 months of 2023. We can see that in other sources like the Gun Violence Archive, which shows a 26% drop in shooting victims this year compared to last year for the first 7 months. We can also see this, the DC Health Department runs a firearm injury dashboard, which shows through the first 5 months of the year a 25% drop in firearm injuries from DC residents. So all three of these sources are saying the exact same thing, which is that gun violence is falling and it's falling fast. We have other evidence, particularly if you match up the data from the FBI that's being reported to the FBI and the data being reported by the DC Police Department. The DC Police Department data shows a much larger decline, specifically as it relates to aggravated assaults or assaults with a deadly weapon and robberies, than the FBI data is. So I think that we can trust the FBI data. If they're trying to, quote, cook the books with respect to aggravated assaults, they did a really bad job because they reported a 4% increase in aggravated assaults in 2024 compared to 2023. So there is some evidence that the public data is probably understating certain types of violent crime. But if we rely on just the FBI data, just on the murder data, just on the carjacking data, which does not appear to be any different from the FBI data, we see that there's a consistent story of an increase in violent crime, an increase in gun violence through 2023, and a steady decline in those incidents through at least 2024, with the murder and gun violence decline accelerating into 2025.
Okay, talk to me about murders in Washington, D.C. What do we know for a fact about murder stats? Are they fantastic? Are they awful? Which is it?
It's neither the best nor the worst, and it's not particularly close to either. In 1991, D.C. recorded 482 murders. The murder rate was 80-something per 100,000. It was the highest murder rate that D.C. had ever recorded, the highest murder rate in the country that year. Then it fell steadily, just like it fell pretty much throughout the country, until 2012 when they had 88 murders. That was a modern low for the city's murder rate. It increased after that through 2023 with the big jump in 2020, 2021, peaking in 2023, and has fallen in 2024 and is down in 2025 to roughly the same level that it was pre-pandemic, which was above the best, the 2012 level, but is down substantially from where it was in 2023. So you can certainly make an argument that DC has too much murder, DC has a crime problem, DC has too much violent crime. You just can't make the argument that these things are increasing or that they're surging or that there's nothing to be learned from the fact that the current trends show them going down.
A lot of people have been focusing on juvenile crime lately. They say it's doing much worse in DC than regular crime. Is that true? And if so, how much of a problem is it?
It's certainly something that's difficult to measure. Juveniles make up only about 8% of people that are arrested in a given year. I think that's from 2024 from the DC Police Department's data. All the evidence we have shows that juveniles are probably making up a higher share of carjackings relative to the population as a whole, relative to the every other crime category. But for the most part, juveniles are only identified when you make an arrest. And in crimes like auto theft, where there's an 8-9% clearance rate nationally, you're not going to know a lot about the share of those crimes being committed by juveniles because let's say you see 40% of the auto thefts, those arrests have a juvenile. Well, now you're talking about 40% of 8%. So you're talking about this tiny slice of overall crime without even working into the fact that for many crimes, half or more are not even reported successfully to the police. So I think it's something that's hard to say. We certainly saw a big increase in juvenile arrests for carjackings. They are disproportionately involved in carjackings compared to their population and in other crimes. At the same time, we've seen a big drop in carjackings and correspondingly a big drop in carjackings being committed by juveniles, or at least where the arresting individual was a juvenile. You're always going to have incidents like the very high-profile carjacking of a Trump administration staffer. It's unfortunate, it's tragic, it's horrific for the victim. I can't say that enough. At the same time, one story, one anecdote, one really bad situation should not drive our policy, should not drive our impression of what the overall trend looks like.
So there's no surge in juvenile crime murders, say. It's a carjacking issue, if anything, yes?
Generally, yes. Carjacking and auto theft are where the disproportionate share of offenders tend to lie. Adults make up the vast majority of shooting victims. They make up the vast majority of murder victims. Your median age of murder victims and your average age of murder victims is going to be late 20s, early 30s, most places. There are juvenile victims, there are juvenile offenders, but these are really adult crimes, and the solutions and the problem is not necessarily being led by juveniles. Kids oftentimes make the easiest target, and that's everywhere. Where crime surges, we talk about juvenile crime first because it makes the easiest target to conceptualize, even if the problem is adult-led.
Okay, if we step away from the current controversy, Washington, D.C. has been a relatively high crime area in America for a long time now. Why would D.C. have more crime than, say, Chicago or Philadelphia?
Well, it doesn't. It has generally roughly the same violent crime rate as those cities. The murder rate in 2024 was largely in line with those cities. I think Philadelphia is probably a little bit lower. Chicago might be a little bit higher, roughly around the same area. One of the real challenges is it's really hard to compare cities. The borders of a city can be drawn very arbitrarily, very differently from metro area to metro area. The example I love to use is St. Louis, where St. Louis is a metro area of 2-point-something million people. And the city itself, where you draw the city's murder rate, has under 300,000 people. So roughly 1 in 10 of people that live in St. Louis gets counted in the city's actual data where you're comparing the murder rate, which you look at a place like New York City, where the vast majority of people that are counted are in New York City itself. And so you're not comparing a suburb, you're not comparing a specific neighborhood to the national average, you're comparing a much larger population. So you really have to be careful when making comparisons, because really, yes, the numerator, the number of murders, matters a lot in that calculation, but the denominator, how the city's border is drawn, matters a ton as well.
There's been a suggestion made by the White House that DC's even a crime hub compared to, quote, the worst places on earth. Is that true?
I think that's subjective. You know, as a Saints fan, a New Orleans Saints fan, I think Atlanta, especially the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, is the worst place on earth. So, you know, you can kind of answer that as you wish. I know that there were comparisons made to places like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York in a very derogatory way. And New York reported the fewest shooting victims that it's ever reported this year. Los Angeles had the fewest murders through June since 1966. Chicago murders down 30-something% this year compared to last year. So DC is like those cities in a lot of ways, but the ways that it's like those cities is that they're all seeing declines in murder and declines in gun violence.
Jeff Asher, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
On Monday night's Planet America, we spoke to Representative Ron Reynolds, one of the Texas Democratic lawmakers who fled interstate to deny the majority Republicans quorum and the ability to pass a redistricting bill that Democrats claim is a racist gerrymander. Well, Republicans stand to gain as many as 5 new House seats in Washington under this Texas scheme being pushed by President Trump and the governor, Greg Abbott. Democrats know that they can't stay out of Texas indefinitely, though, even if they avoid possible arrest amid allegations of bribery. But according to California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, they can fight fire with fire. So today he announced that California voters will vote on a proposition in November to pass what he's calling the Election Rigging Response Act, allowing him to gerrymander a bunch of House districts in California in the Democrats' favour.
Donald Trump, you have poked the bear, and we will punch back. Here's the good thing about California, folks. We're the size of 21 state populations combined. We're the fourth largest economy in the world. We're not a small, isolated state. I know they say don't mess with Texas. Well, don't mess with the great Golden State.
Talking tough, and that looked awfully like a presidential campaign event, which in a sense I guess it was. But pollsters today have bad news for Governor Newsom. By nearly a 2-to-1 margin, California voters say they prefer to keep an independent line-drawing panel to determine the state's House seats. Just 36% of respondents back returning congressional redistricting authority to state lawmakers like Gavin Newsom. That is what he wants to do, although Newsom does say he will return that power to an independent commission again after the next census in 2030. So, however this pans out in November, this vote will be a battle. There will be high stakes for both next year's midterms. Newsom as well will be thinking this is going to have a big impact on his presidential aspirations. Those Texas Democrats, though, it could be after Newsom's announcement, Chaz, they're going to declare mission accomplished and go home, signalling that, well, they might have, they had their Zoom call with Barack Obama. Newsom's acting. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois is looking at scrounging a seat or two. So, yeah, maybe we'll just go back and let the Republicans redistrict if they dare.
I can understand them going home. This is expensive for them. The courts have stopped the super PACs funding them now.
Yeah.
So they're being fined $500 a day. They're paying for their own accommodation.
They get paid $600 a month to be a representative in Texas, so it's not a full-time gig.
Yeah, they're not at their jobs at the moment, so they have no income. So this is very costly for them, and they were never going to hold out till December 8th. That's a long, long way away, which is what you need to hold out till to stop the maps.
Yeah. So
they've raised awareness, which was their intention. They might as well go home.
But this is a roll of the dice for Gavin Newsom, surely.
It is. This is actually, that poll, I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it, because I have talked to you about the fact that the red states can gerrymander a lot more than the blue states can in America right now. Mm-hmm. Like there are maybe 5 to 8 seats on offer for the blue states, but there are like 20 seats on offer for the red states. If we look at the actual proposed map from Gavin Newsom, this will be confirmed today, you can see that they've gone from a 43 Democrat, 9 Republican California to a 48 Democrat, 4 Republican seat California. So they've pinched 5 seats there if they pull this off. But Republicans can pinch 20.
Yeah.
And what might happen, I hadn't even thought of this, is that California might push for this vote, like Newsom is saying. The red states retaliate immediately. They take their 15, 20 seats, which they can easily do, and then Newsom might lose the vote anyway, and then get 0 for California. And so what that means is the Republicans won't just get 5 seats from Texas, they'll get 20 seats. Yes. That's a real threat. Now, that's fine for Newsom's presidential hopes that he fought, but that's a disaster for Democrats, potentially.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be politically great for him if he does lose. California is kind of a 60-40 Democrat majority state. Gone are the days of Reagan and Nixon where Republicans could win statewide races there. But this is a test, and there's a lot of work to be done. Some red state, or at least some swing state governors who are currently Republicans, like Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, have already ruled out redistricting there. That's not any great sort of moral stand. It's because they would struggle to get it through the state legislature in order to do it. But this is potentially going to be quite a difficult fight for Democrats, and you have to wonder, do they know what they're doing in all of this? Newsom's approach very different to the approach that they're taking in Washington, D.C. when it comes to taking on Trump, because Newsom is doing his best right now to make himself the leader of the opposition, but it could go horribly wrong. Yeah,
I do want to make one more point as well, which is going to make people angry. You can pose your fingers over the comment section. I do think that if the only gerrymander that happens is the Texas gerrymander, while that's unfair in Texas, it could actually make the situation nationally more fair in the House, because right now the map kind of favours the Democrats in the House right now. In 2024, the Republicans got 51.3% of the votes in House races, but only ended up controlling 50.5% of the House seats. So the map was already favouring Democrats slightly, and that's partly because the census miscounted slightly in 2020, and the Democrats have basically 4 more seats than they should have, according to the 2020 census. But on top of that, populations have changed in the last 6 years. Republicans, if they had a new census tomorrow, would probably have 6 to 8 more seats than they currently do in the House. So the Democrats winning, so the Republicans gerrymandering 5 seats in Texas, while that is unfair, it actually makes the House more like a 50-50 situation, if we're being honest. But if the gerrymandering arms race gets out of control and they pinch 15, then that's completely swings it the other way.
Yes, and Democrats would counter, well, if you want to talk about gerrymandering, look at the United States Senate.
Oh, yeah.
Where North and South Dakota get a total of 4 senators, and they have a population that is a fraction of the 2 senators that they currently have in California.
The Senate's a very different story.
Yeah, and of course we talk about Democrats and Republicans, but of course this is really Democrats versus Trump. And we don't know what the Republican candidates next year in the midterms are going to attract from Trump voters. Are the Trump voters going to switch back to Democrats? Are the Latinos who thought that Trump was going to only get rid of the criminal illegal immigrants, but he's now getting rid of people that have been in America for 20 years? There's some evidence to suggest that his numbers have collapsed amongst Hispanics and Asian Americans. So this is very much a moving feast, I suppose. But let's talk a bit about Trump and his enduring appeal to some voters. Our next guest is journalist Salena Zito. She's a native of Western Pennsylvania. She's a former staffer of Republican-turned-Democratic Senator Arlen Specter, but she was one of the first reporters to notice Donald Trump's unique appeal to the white working class of that Rust Belt state during his 2016 presidential campaign. Back in those days, Salena was writing for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review and then the New York Post, and she was one of the very few mainstream media figures who predicted that Trump would defeat Hillary Clinton that year. And it was Salena Zito who popularised that notion, which is quite a fascinating sort of a framing. She says that while journalists took Trump literally but not seriously, his supporters take him seriously but not literally. And that explains why they tend to overlook his many outrageous utterances and inappropriate attacks. Salena Zito was also standing just a couple of metres away from Donald Trump at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania last July, when the then former president was clipped by a would-be assassin's bullet. She's written about that fateful, historic day and Trump's enduring appeal to his supporters in her new book. It's titled Butler.
The president just had been speaking maybe for 4 minutes, and he did something that two things he never does. And a chart comes down. And if there's ever a chart, it's at the end. And if there ever is a chart, it's on the other side of him. So it was I was very confused by that. And he also, which is why the cover is so important, President Trump and people that attend his rallies, if you've ever watched them with great detail, he never turns his head away. He may turn his body away, but he never turns his neck away. The relationship between him and people attending, and again, you can see that in the crowd, is very transactional. There's a connective tissue is there. He gives them attention, they respond in return. So he turns his neck, and that's when 4 gunshots go right over my head. I saw him grab his ear, and I saw him take himself down. So that made me think, okay, maybe he's not mortally wounded. I knew immediately what it was. I'm a gun owner. Within seconds, I was surrounded by about 7 Secret Service agents. Sort of like this sea of blue went around him at the same time that the next round of shots went over my head. This is how I saw it. And it's very true. You do think in slow motion in a tragic situation. I don't know what happens to our brains, but everything slows down. And you're very, very aware of every sound around you. And I remember thinking, I have a purpose. God gave me a gift to be a reporter. I need to record this. And I remember thinking, there were people that covered Lincoln when he was shot, right? And I read so many books about these things over the years. So I understood that I had a job to do. I could see the president's face I was at a very odd angle, but I could see his face. I could see him talking. I could hear him talking to the Secret Service agents. I heard the crowd start saying USA. And I could see him mouthing it. I couldn't hear him say it though. And as he stand up and they put a protective stance around him to take him off the stage. Oh, I also heard him arguing with the Secret Service that he wanted to put his shoes on. And he turns and they're ready to take him off the stage. He says, wait, I won't go yet. And he turns and says, fight, fight, fight.
On that day in Butler, Salena, President Trump literally came millimetres from death. That's the kind of thing that can affect any human being quite profoundly. How do you think that impacted him?
He's been profoundly changed in numerous ways. We talked a lot about God and the hand of God in that moment, in those 7 conversations. I think he wanted to talk to someone that was there. You know, when you have a tragic event and you try to explain it to their family, the family is empathetic, but wasn't there, right? I was there, and we have a mutual respect for each other based on the people I cover and the people that he shows up for. So that's sort of where that cross section between him and I happens. And he talked, he kept questioning me that day. Salena, why did I turn my head? I don't remember making that decision. I don't remember telling anyone to put that chart down. 1 inch away, and that goes right between my ears. I'm dead. Why did I do that? And he always came back to the hand of God, which then leads him to talk about purpose. What is my purpose? Why was I saved in that moment? And he believes, and he and I have talked about it as often as a week ago, when he was here in Pittsburgh for an AI energy event. And he believes that his vision of what he believes the country should look like and stand for is why he was saved. And he knows he's not guaranteed another day. He knows he's not guaranteed another minute. So if he was able to win, and he was, that he would take on the issues he felt most important and bring them across the line.
Salena, you've gained this reputation as being the journalist who understands Trump's supporters and Trump's appeal to them, the white working class base that he has. And you also write in this book that a lot of journalists still out there on the campaign trail don't understand Trump's supporters. How do you try and explain it to them?
I don't have a secret power other than geography. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. This was the heart and soul of the Democratic Party since 1932. This is where the working class come from. This is basically the center of where his coalition began. And so geography helps me understand why people have rejected both parties. The Democratic Party has very much lost its way with the working class and the middle class. They have focused on issues that either negatively impact their lives, like over-regulating industry, which then takes away their jobs, and or trade deals that takes their jobs and their companies outside of the country. So that detachment from the Democratic Party has been slow. People were very reluctant to move away. But when a disruptor came along, such as Trump, and said, both of these parties have been screwing you over, they were like, yeah, we've been saying that for years. Finally, someone recognizes that. And so I think the nuance that people miss in America, covering American politics, and this is throughout the book, it's one of the most important aspects of the book, and that is the importance of place, right? Where you are from, where your roots are from. That has much more meaning than I think most pollsters and reporters and these days Democrats, but also a lot of Republicans, very entrenched Republicans, that place matters. 8 out of 10 Americans live within 100 miles of where they grew up. 6 out of 10 young people live within 5 miles of where they grew up in this country. And so that's what I understand. That's what I've been chronicling for decades. It's just been building up. This has not happened overnight.
Of course, Salena, for decades, Republicans tried to find another Ronald Reagan. Democrats are probably still looking for another Barack Obama. Do you think Republicans are going to be able to find another Donald Trump, or is he really just a one-off?
I don't think you can replicate him. No, there will never be another one like Donald Trump. However, there are certainly a group of up-and-coming Republicans that understand where the party has gone, how much the working class have moved over. Working class, white, Asian, Black, Hispanic, all working class has moved firmly over into the Republican Party. And those who can speak to that, right? Whoever wins an election has to have the working class. And that forever was the Democrats. And so, whoever can speak to that, and certainly J.D. Vance has that unique ability, having grown up in Appalachia, but also been very successful and, gone to Yale, right? He's sort of done it all. So, he definitely has that appeal. The Democrats' challenge is their version of populism is too far to the left, right? Think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or the recent candidate for mayor in New York City. So the far left populism, while it's very energizing if you are on the far left, it really doesn't bring the people in the middle that you need to win an election into your coalition.
Salena Zito, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Planet America.
Thank you very much.
Now, before we go, President Trump continues to try and exert unusual influence over American culture. After basically making himself the chairman of the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in DC and purging its board, overhauling its programming, this week he announced the next batch of Kennedy Center honorees.
I've been asked to host. I said, I'm the president of the United States. Are you fools asking me to do that? Sir, you'll get much higher ratings. I said, I don't care. I'm president of the United States. I won't do it. They said, please.
Let's hope he's a better negotiator with Vladimir Putin. By they, he presumably means arch-loyalists like Rick Grenell, who Trump appointed the interim director of the Kennedy Center.
So I have agreed to host. Do you believe what I have to do? And I didn't want to do it, okay? They're going to say, he insisted. I did not insist. But I think it will be quite successful, actually. It's been a long time. I used to host the Apprentice finales, and we did rather well with that.
Yeah, we know about
Grandpa?
The Apprentice.
Tell us about The Apprentice. Trump claims that he did not ask about the politics of the honorees, although he also admitted that he did veto some potential recipients because of their wokeness.
I turned down plenty. They were too woke. I had a couple of wokesters.
Look, you can't be considering the honorees politics too closely because Gene Simmons from KISS hates Trump.
Yeah.
Back in 2022, he told Spin magazine, once upon a time, you were embarrassed to be publicly racist and out there with conspiracy theories. Now it's all out in the open because he allowed it. And Simmons is definitely not a fan of January 6 at all. Said a lot about that. So I think that is at least evidence Trump wasn't being partisan with his choices.
Although Paul Stanley, the lead singer of KISS, is a big Trump supporter. But either way, the honorees don't get to talk.
No,
usually. It's all about their peers performing and honouring them while they sit there quietly, usually with the president in the box, but now it's the president who's going to be hosting the whole event. How is this not going to be political?
He didn't want to host it, John.
No. Please, sir, please host.
I should say, I do think it's pretty clear what Trump did base his selections on, and that is his eccentric personal playlist.
Yes.
Because he's got Michael Crawford there. Who else is handing out awards to Michael Crawford in 2025? We all know how much Trump loves the Phantom of the Opera.
So the people in this very large stadium who are waiting for Trump to speak, it doesn't matter to them politically. What they want to hear is the fight, Anderson. I can just scan the room here and I can see multiple people wearing his mugshot as a source of pride. So what they want from him tonight,
I'm sorry, is that the
the
Phantom
fight.
of the Opera soundtrack playing?
It is indeed. We've heard Bocelli, we've heard Sinead O'Connor.
I think we're going to have to go because the sound is sort of overpowering.
Classic Trump rally energy there. He's made the whole award show his.
Yeah, it is a pretty remarkable thing. But, you know, the way that Trump is now redesigning the Kennedy Center itself, he's renovating that. Apparently, if you walk into the lobby now, first thing you see is you don't see the bust of John F. Kennedy anymore. You see a big portrait of Donald Trump and Melania Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. They're renaming the Opera House after Melania Trump, that well-known opera buff. So he is shameless in all of this, but he's clearly a man looking to make his mark before time runs out.
So it seems.
Well, that's it for another trip to Planet America for a weekend edition. Do join us on ABC TV on Monday night for the latest reaction to that Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. That's at 9:35 p.m. Monday night, right after Media Watch.
We're also going to be back here on ABC News for the weekend edition next Friday night. And do not forget the Pep podcast and all the best pod places right there.
Bye-bye.